And I just approved it. I'm going to press the admit button now.
Hello, welcome to New York State NAMI, our policy lunch and learn for October 6th, 2025. Lunch and learns are usually on the first Monday of the month. I'm Elizabeth Uresta, policy intern for NAMI New York State. The NAMI New York State Policy Lunch and Learns began as a way to help educate our members about complex policy issues to better prepare them to talk to legislators and make them more aware of resources that are available throughout the state. The last Lunch and Learn covered temporary disability. If you want to find the recordings of this or previous Lunch and Learns, go to NAMI New York State website and look under Advocacy. Today's topic is focused on New York State's mental health courts, which aim to enhance safety, improve court operations, and foster recovery. We have two speakers from New York State Unified Court System Office of Justice Initiatives to talk to us today. With that, I'll turn the meeting over to them.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kimberly Van Camp, and I am the New York State Mental Health Court Project Director. I am employed through the Office for Justice Initiatives Problem-Solving Justice Division. I'm also a longtime supporter of NAMI Rochester and a past board president. NAMI Rochester has the distinction of having been the first New York State NAMI affiliate to serve as advisor and community partner to a mental health court, having been invited to serve as a Monroe County Mental Health Court Steering Committee member in 2002. NAMI Rochester continues to provide meaningful support and advocacy for the Monroe County Mental Health Court participants and their families. I have the pleasure of being joined today by Christine Edwards, Chief Counsel to the Office for Justice Initiatives Problem-Solving Justice Division. In addition to our work with the New York State Mental Health Courts, Christine and I serve on the New York State Judicial Task Force on Mental Illness. This webinar will provide you with a brief history of mental health courts, information on how they work, how they benefit justice-involved individuals living with mental illness, and how communities can support mental health courts. And with that, we'll get started. Let's begin with an introduction to mental health courts. So what is a mental health court? A mental health court is a specialized court part, and it's an adult criminal court part typically, although we are expanding into family treatment courts. They're for eligible individuals living with mental illness who are charged with an offense, as I said, in an adult criminal court. And the mental health court is designed to provide access to treatment and support services with the primary objective of improving the individual's quality of life and reducing recidivism. The missions and goals of the mental health court are typically fall within 6 domains. First is to improve public safety by reducing recidivism and build healthier communities. Secondly, and these are not in any particular order, but most importantly, is to improve the quality of life for justice-involved individuals living with mental illness, thereby reversing the trend of criminalizing mental health diagnoses. And we want to eliminate and significantly reduce the length of incarceration for justice-involved individuals living with mental illness. We want to improve the court's ability to identify assess, and support justice-involved individuals with a mental health diagnosis. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the innovative practices that are being put in place to help us do that. We want to improve coordination between the mental health and criminal justice systems. This is so important. We're dealing with the same individual, and when we are able to work in a coordinated, collaborative fashion, we can produce much better outcomes. And then ultimately, if we can do all of those things, we're going to contribute to a more effective use of behavioral health and criminal justice resources. So where did all of this begin? The history of mental health courts in the United States began in Broward County, Florida. The first mental health court was established there in 1997, and it was in response to a grand jury probe that was investigating the community mental health shortfalls, which included jail overcrowding, the overrepresentation of individuals with mental illness in the criminal justice system, and ultimately there were several jail suicides. What came of this, the grand jury inquiry, was the recommendation of a multi-agency task force to look at these issues and to try to come up with a meaningful plan to address these concerns in a way that has never been done before. I had put in a copy here of Judge Ginger Lerner Wren's book, A Court of Refuge, where she tells the story of the first mental health court and how it came into existence. The first dedicated mental health court in the United States was basically an offshoot of her criminal court part. It was often held during lunchtime without any federal funding or specific financial support. And what it led to was a revolutionary change in the way we deal with the intersection of the criminal justice system and mental illness. What came after the 1997 development of the mental health court, there were many other jurisdictions throughout the United States that were interested in how they could put a mental health court into practice in their jurisdictions. I'd also like to put the note that the drug court movement started in Florida in 1985. So there was all of those lessons to learn from, as well as the new information that was coming from the Broward Treatment Court. So there was a rapid growth of mental health courts across the United States. Today, we are looking at 679 adult mental health courts and 51 juvenile mental health courts in 46 states. And that statistic is as of December 2024. In addition, there are 42 adult co-occurring disorder courts and 7 juvenile co-occurring disorder courts. There are courts, as I said, in 46 states. And the states with the highest number of mental health courts are California, New York, and Georgia. And again, I put this picture here as a reference. There are detailed statistics in this document on all treatment courts, including mental health courts, drug courts, veterans courts, DWI courts, co-occurring disorder courts. And there's also an additional breakdown of family treatment courts and various family and or juvenile parts. In New York State, again, our objectives and goals are not different than others. We're looking at our goals are to seek to improve public safety and the well-being of justice-involved individuals with mental illness by linking them to court-supervised community-based treatment and service providers as an alternative to incarceration. The mental health courts provide ongoing monitoring, support, and advocacy for participants. And that's really what makes the difference in a mental health court, is that in the mental health court, what you'll see is an individual comes in with needs, but immediately they are linked to service providers, a treatment team, and interact with a judge who has specific knowledge and training about living with mental illness, as well as an entire team that is looking to provide linkages, support, and advocacy for this participant. The unified court system is working to build and sustain mental health courts throughout New York State so that all New Yorkers in need can have access to these life-changing courts. In New York State, the first mental health court opened in 2002 in Brooklyn, New York. It started out as a pilot program, and it has expanded to a statewide initiative. And really, it encompasses the shift towards treatment over incarceration. There are currently 41 operational mental health courts in 27 New York counties, and there are an additional 7 counties who are actively engaged in the planning and implementation phase. We are working on establishing a mental health court in all 62 counties. And in those jurisdictions where that may not be possible, we're also working to create a plan that will provide meaningful intervention and support for individuals who require additional services and service linkages. Here's a map of New York State, and the areas that are represented in the green are locations where there are operational mental health courts. The orange represents, I'm sorry, let's move to yellow. Yellow are the counties that are actively engaged in the planning and implementation process. And the orange locations are counties that have indicated a desire and interest to begin the initial phases of the planning and implementation. There are 2 counties here that are green with yellow highlight, and those 2 counties represent Oneida and Onondaga County. They have operational misdemeanor mental health courts, and they're working to expand, currently working to expand to Superior Court parts so that they can accept individuals who are charged with felony offenses. And Sullivan County is a new addition after we printed this map. Sullivan County has recently indicated a desire to begin the planning and exploration process. So that's where we stand in New York State right now. But as you can see, there's a lot of work ahead of us. There are several jurisdictions that don't have a mental health court at present. And in those cases, we're exploring options to provide supports and working with other partners to try to make sure that folks have access to services while we are working to expand and create meaningful alternative interventions. We're exploring, as a part of the New York State Task Force, ways that we can reach some of the more rural communities in a meaningful way. So what are the essential elements of a mental health court, and what makes it different than a traditional criminal court part? It's the team and the coordinated planning that occurs in a non-adversarial setting. In a mental health court, you will see that there is a judge, attorneys, there are mental health providers, case managers, oftentimes law enforcement and/or probation. There are a number of partners that make up the team. In Rochester, NAMI Rochester is an integral part of our team. And what we do is we look at each individual and work as a committed team while being mindful of each individual role at the table. For instance, a defense attorney's role would be very different than the district attorney's role. But just as with any team, any functional team, you will see that if each discipline maintains fidelity to their role, we can collaborate and work much more effectively together. The judge is the lead of the team. The judge is the ultimate decision maker, but the judge participates in the discussions and the planning, and is very involved with each individual that comes into mental health court from the very beginning. There's a referral and an assessment process for mental health court, whereby individuals will receive mental health screening and assessment to determine clinical eligibility to participate, as well as their case will be screened by the legal professionals to determine legal eligibility. Once the person is determined to be eligible to participate, there will be the development of a needs-based individualized treatment plan that will be, which can be modified going forward as the individual's needs change. Now, when I talk about legal and clinical eligibility, that is often defined by the individual jurisdiction. For instance, when I was showing the map a few moments ago, there are some courts currently that are able to take misdemeanors. And they're currently in the process of expanding so that they can begin to take individuals charged with felonies. Some courts have the ability to work with individuals with major mental illness, whereas there are other courts who have developed very effective partnerships with other types of providers and may be able to bring in folks with various other diagnoses. And that's often a function of the community. Most of the mental health courts want to cast as wide a net as possible within reason and within their ability to effectively service and treat the individuals before them. So if there are limitations, it's often something that is based upon the lack of services or resources at present. Judicial monitoring. Judicial monitoring is probably one of the most unique and important pieces of a mental health court operation. If you observe a mental health court, you'll see that there's a very special interaction between the participant and the judge. The judge is often very well informed on treatment issues, the individualized treatment plan, and basically how that individual is doing in the community. But the relationship goes further than that. Many judges have a great deal of information and knowledge about each of the participants, because what they do is they spend between 3 and 7 minutes often at each appearance just talking to the person, asking them how they're doing, what they need, how their treatment is going, how are they feeling, discussing successes that the person may have experienced over the last few weeks, or reviewing any service adjustments that may need to be made to help support that individual going forward. Community-based treatment. What is so special about community-based treatment is that there is a collaboration and communication between the treatment providers and the mental health court team, focused on helping the person advance and succeed. All of this is done with fidelity to the HIPAA regulations and CFR 42 Part 2. But what it is it allows the community supports, treatment providers, and the court team to be working with that participant in a shared direction, and providing support, advocacy, and looking to try to close any gaps that may exist in that person's care and plan and needs. Also essential to our team would be peer support and educational and vocational programs. However, peer support takes on a very different role in the treatment court as compared to mental health providers. The peer support is typically a support for the participant. The peers are not asked to report on interactions or meetings with the participant. It's there solely to provide support and encouragement for our participants, but they are an integral role in the process. And then the educational and vocational programs. Many of our communities have the ability to work with providers within these realms, within their communities, which can provide access to GED task programs to college admission, vocational programs, including linkages and referrals to employment, right to life coaching and job skills coaches. And again, all of this is an important piece because ideally what we're trying to do in a mental health court is address the situation that came before the court. But what we want to do is, as we work with people, put them in a much better place before they graduate from our program. And then graduation. And again, these are highlights of essential elements. There are so many more, but the graduation is the point in time when their cases are disposed of. And typically our successful participants will have their cases either reduced or dismissed. All of that information is determined when the person comes into the court. And again, as I said, it's a voluntary agreement that the participant come into mental health court. But when they do, they typically have a participant agreement, which is similar to a contract. And it explains what the expectations of the court are, what the court can offer, and the supports that will be offered, and then ultimately defines what the outcome for successful completion and or unsuccessful completion would be. And that information is thoroughly reviewed with the participant by their defense attorney prior to them agreeing to participate. Those are some of the highlights. I think a couple of other things that are very important to note too. There's a lot of training, the ongoing training that occurs for a treatment court team, including the judges, so that the judges, again, in the courthouse, the judge, the attorneys, and even the folks that are working on the mental health court team as coordinators, case managers, are typically, now there are some exceptions, but are typically not providing clinical services. Basically what the folks are doing on the court side is making sure that the information about the clinical care is being communicated to the judges and to the attorneys, and that there's a way that to make sure that everyone has the same information and understands it. But in order to make that effective, one of the things that we try to do is provide a great deal of ongoing training for our team about the team roles, so that the treatment professionals have an understanding of the criminal justice process, so that the mental health professionals have are confident that the court team understands what their role is and that there are guardrails in place. And vice versa, that the court team understands clinical practice, what the limitations are of confidentiality, how the clinical team devises individualized treatment plans, the meaning of client-centered and person-centered care. Treatment court teams are often trained in motivational interviewing and trauma-informed practice. So there's a lot, and then there's a lot of cross-training, again, so that we're all coming from the same place and we can at least understand each other's language and terminology. And then incentives and sanctions and service adjustments are also a really important piece of this process. Incentives. In the Monroe County Mental Health Court, one of our greatest incentives was one that was created because we had no specialized funding, and we wanted to do something to acknowledge the successes of some of our participants. So we created honor roll. And basically it was an acknowledgement. It was the judge and the treatment team clapping and acknowledging a person's successes. And that individual's case would be called very early on in our court calendar, and they would be allowed to leave thereafter, which was an incentive. And that was one of those incentives that we knew it was working when we received a phone call from a local treatment provider asking what this honor roll is, because the client wouldn't stop talking about it. So that was an example of an incentive. And service adjustments, there's been a lot of emphasis put on service adjustments in lieu of sanctions. Because what we really want, I mean, what the treatment team and the mental health court team is trying to do is to create a favorable outcome for our participants. And so what we have to ask ourselves is to ask that question, what else could we do? What could we do differently? What does this person need? And asking the person, those questions as well, and trying to come up with service adjustments that might then, change the outcome, as opposed to sanctions. Now, there are some times when sanctions are utilized, and again, the treatment courts typically use graduated sanctions. So there is typically, a lesser response to a proximal infraction as opposed to a distal infraction. What we really want to do is just try, again, the focus in a mental health court is how can we look at this person's outcome and change the outcome to become more favorable. And then I think lastly is the data collection and evaluation. The treatment courts are one of the most researched branches of the criminal justice system. And that is because there's always been a strong partnership between the clinical side and the criminal justice side. And there have also been several grant opportunities that have been afforded to treatment courts. And a primary component of the grant is an evaluation piece, which is wonderful because of the fact that it allows our practices to be guided by science. So that is a critical component, is data collection and then evaluation. The sequential intercept model, I included this. I don't know how familiar folks are with this model, but it was first developed in the early 2000s by Dr. Munitz and Dr. Griffin, along with Dr. Hank Stedman of Policy Research Associates. And basically what it does is it provides a conceptual framework to guide community-based responses for people with mental health and substance use disorders who come into contact with the criminal justice and legal system. And the reason why I think this is really important is I want to underscore that where the treatment courts fall in this sequential intercept model. And that's in intercept 3, jails and courts, and you'll see specialty court. And why is that important? Because I want to point out that the treatment courts are proponents and advocates and support earlier intercepts and diversion. Treatment courts are not for every person who comes into contact with the criminal justice system. We're a really good option for those that are looking at further insertion into the criminal justice system. But we want to, again, I just want to underscore the importance of things that are occurring at intercept 0, community services, and diverting out with law enforcement. If there's a call for service and the person can be diverted out of the system. There are also opportunities to divert out of the system and to be linked with the appropriate services and care at intercept 2 when a person has their initial detention hearing or arraignment. So I just wanted to just really underscore the importance that, the treatment court, we're looking for folks that are high risk, high need, who we feel fairly confident that with the appropriate level of advocacy, support, intervention, and service connection, we can help them to achieve the quality of life that they deserve in a way that is safe for that individual and for the community. Which leads me into benefits for justice-involved individuals. First and foremost, I think, is access to treatment. When people come into the treatment courts, into mental health court, so often what we see are individuals who are not linked with mental health care, medication, any support services, peer support, even medical, dental, they're not linked with care. So when they come into the mental health court and we do that needs-based assessment, what we're looking for is what do they need? And again, we're asking those questions of the individual participant. What do they need, and how can we connect them with the services that they not only need, but are entitled to and deserve? And then what we do is we make those initial service connections. We provide them with a care manager, case manager through the courts as well. And oftentimes folks are also provided with community-based care managers. But what we then do is we monitor how that individual is doing in their treatment. How are they responding to treatment? How do they like the treatment? What else do they need? And what goals do they have as they're moving forward? And again, we're constantly reassessing and trying to make those referrals and provide that support, and linking folks with social supports and social networks. That is so important for individuals to have favorable and things to look forward to through peer support, community support, and other social networks that are out, within our communities. We're also empowering folks because again, the participants are actively involved in their treatment and recovery process, as well as the planning and needs assessment. And what we do is we try to provide as supportive a team as possible to help create that atmosphere and opportunities for recovery, rehabilitation, and reintegration. And then also looking toward the future, as we talked about, the social support is making sure that as that person is achieving successes in the mental health court, that we're transitioning that supportive network from that which is created in the mental health court to something that they can refer to in the community, so that success that they experienced while they were in the mental health court is something that they can sustain and have social supports and a network to work to help them to continue the success. And then what we're seeing is that there are lower rates of recidivism. And people are doing better, they're healthier, there's healthier individuals and healthier communities. So what community impact and support? So we talked a little bit about the public safety. We contribute to safer communities because what we're doing is we're addressing public health issues that have often led to arrest. And by creating effective interventions and linking people with services to improve their quality of life, we're creating healthier communities. One individual, one family at a time. Resource efficiency it's so important to look at. When we have a limited pool of resources, mental health courts allow us to reduce the strain on jails and courts. And what I mean by the strain on jails and courts is that jails and courts have, you look at the BJA reports and other Department of Justice reports that reference the fact that the jails and prisons have become the de facto psychiatric service care providers. Well, by getting people linked with community-based care, what we're doing is we're taking the criminal justice system out of providing mental health care, and just advocating and supporting the public health entities that are providing the care within the community. And that allows us to then make sure that the criminal justice and behavioral resources are being allocated in the most effective way possible and getting to the people most in need in a way that is going to help improve outcomes. Community engagement is so important. It's a critical piece for presentations like this to occur, because we are stronger together. A mental health court is a court. But what we've done is we've brought in critical collaborations so that we can work together to create a better, safer, healthier community. But that only works when the community is involved, that the community is supporting diversion efforts, that they're advocating for more opportunities for folks, that they're advocating that there are more treatment slots, that they're supporting when a community residence is being built, that our community is involved in supporting that, so that we can create opportunities for folks, and then therefore creating successful engagement and sustainable interventions. And then advocacy. It goes right along with community engagement. It's just a little bit more organized. You know, programs like NAMI, to have NAMI come out and support the use of mental health courts as, is a part of a broad strategy, kind of going back to that sequential intercept model, that, mental health courts are a very important piece of the greater continuum. That is so critical, because what we need is the mental health courts need the support and advocacy, as do the individual participants. They need to have people in the community that are advocating for their needs. And I'm speaking to folks from NAMI who you do this so well. So thank you for all that you're doing. So as we do all this work, what happens? We end up with the opportunity for reforms. We end up with more science to guide what we're doing, and to inform our practices. So this slide, there was a national judicial task force to examine the state court's response to mental illness. And that was formed back in March of 2020, leading to this report and recommendations in October of 2022. New York State had representation on this, this task force. And ultimately, what came of that was the recommendation that New York State created a judicial task force on mental illness, and issued their first annual report and recommendations in February of this year. And again, what it's looking at is not just mental health courts, but it's looking at that intersection of individuals living with mental illness and the nexus between living with mental illness and criminal justice and or family court involvement. And how can we improve outcomes? What can we do differently? And as the title so aptly says, leading change. How can we be part of reform and creating better opportunities and more opportunities for diversion? So as we talk about science and science leading the way, the evolution of mental health court practice standards, I think this is something that's of interest to many people, because what we're seeing here is the first document back in 2007, improving responses to people with mental illness, was really the guiding document for mental health courts as far as what are our practice standards. They called them at that time the essential elements of a mental health court. And I referred to them earlier: planning, administration, defining your target population, timely participant identification and linkage to services, terms of participation, informed choice, treatment supports and services, confidentiality, a multidisciplinary court team, monitoring adherence to court requirements, and sustainability. Those were all included in the essential elements of a mental health court. So now we move on 18 years, and All Rise, formerly known as the National Association for Drug Court Professionals, has the mental health courts and veterans courts and DWI courts have all come under the umbrella of All Rise. And they published the Adult Treatment Court Best Practice Standards. This is the most recent update from July of 2025. But what's really exciting about this is that they have I believe there's several best practice standards. I think we're up till 10 now, but they're not numbered. But you can access this document just by putting that into your browser. But what it does is it creates best practice standards for mental health courts. And New York has adopted the Adult Treatment Court Best Practice Standards as the practice standards for our treatment courts. What we have done additionally is created and implementing the best practice standards in mental health court series. So what we are doing is we're taking a look at each one of the best practice standards that was written. A lot of it came out of drug court research, but they've also replicated the research to ensure that it is applicable in all of our treatment courts. But we're taking a deeper dive and looking at each practice standard as it pertains to mental health courts. And the best practice standards are target population, the roles and responsibilities of the judge, the multidisciplinary team, substance use, mental health and trauma treatment and recovery management, complementary services and recovery capital, community supervision, incentive sanctions and service adjustments, drug and alcohol testing, and program monitoring, evaluation, and improvement. So this is a really exciting development, because one of the things that we had recognized as we were looking at our planning and our expansion of mental health courts was the need to have a set of practice standards that would apply to all of our mental health courts. So we have this, and we are working to make sure that all of our treatment court teams, our judges and court staff are trained on the Adult Treatment Court Best Practice Standards and understand how to implement them in their treatment courts. Okay, so then what else are we doing? So the mental health court expansion, I've spoken to you about that a couple of times here, but what is really exciting is that we are in the process of creating new mental health courts across the state, thereby expanding the capacity and enhancing and supporting our existing operational mental health courts as well. And then we're also taking that look at what can we do if a court can't support a mental health court in their jurisdiction. Maybe they lack resources, or they think they lack resources. What can we do to support those jurisdictions and help them to be able to develop interventions and off-ramps for people who are justice involved individuals who are coming into the criminal justice system? So we are looking not only at expanding mental health courts, but also looking, if we can't do that, what can we do with that jurisdiction to make sure that folks have an access to care? And one really exciting collaboration is with the New York State Office of Mental Health and the creation of the Court-Based Navigators Initiative. Basically, there will be court-based OMH navigators that will be located within courthouses throughout New York State. I believe that they're up to 40 counties now that will be receiving navigators. And basically what they're going to be doing is offering an opportunity for individuals who are coming into the criminal justice system to be linked with mental health treatment, substance use disorder treatment, and any complementary services, including housing or peer support or any other services that they may need. They may need a referral to Department of Social Services, to assistance with insurance or housing, or they may need food or a winter coat. These court-based navigators will be a presence within our courthouses and will be working to provide these early linkages. Again, this will be a service that is completely voluntary. And the navigators will be keeping track of who they're contacting and what type of services they're connecting folks with, but they will not be reporting back to the court unless the individual signs a release and authorizes that type of interaction. Again, it's a service intended to try to provide those essential linkages as early as possible in the process for individuals living with mental illness who are coming into the criminal justice system. All right, mental health court outcomes. There's the biggest, I think, as we look at this, we end up with healthier individuals who are connected with services, care, interventions in their community so that they can live the quality of life that they deserve. As a result of that, we end up with lower rates of recidivism, higher rates of service linkage and utilization. And one of the things we've seen over the years with treatment courts is that's where we really excel, is that we're able to link folks with services, but then through the support and monitoring and continual advocacy on behalf of the court teams, we're finding that the folks that come through the treatment courts are more likely to stay involved in that care, and even voice needs for other levels of care. And then subsequently, we're also seeing lowered rates of acute care utilization. So what we're seeing is that when we have people connected with medical and dental care, with a psychiatrist and clinicians, they're not automatically going to the emergency room where it's the most expensive treatment, but it's also very disjointed in a lot of cases because there's a lack of follow through. Whereas if we have a person linked with a primary care physician and they can see their primary care physician, there's a really comprehensive record of their needs, their care, and a continuity and consistency. So those are really incredible outcomes because, again, as I said before, we're seeing healthier individuals and therefore healthier communities. As with all programs, we face challenges. We have funding constraints. There's limited financial resources for program expansion and sustainability, although right now we're in a really good place because we have the support of the New York State government and the unified court system to expand the treatment courts, or the mental health court. But again, we also need to make sure that we have the resources within each of our communities to be able to do so. Staffing needs and limited resources are an ongoing problem at the community level. There are shortages of trained professionals. And some communities have very limited access to behavioral health providers and supports. So that's requiring us to look at these challenges through a different lens and try to come up with different types of interventions using technology, using virtual appointments, if that makes sense, linking people with services that may not be within their community if it's safe and practical. Maybe some options for us as we move forward. Systemic barriers. These are very complex systems with complex sets of rules, and being able to create the collaborations can be challenging. And a lot of it ends up hinged on education and understanding, and making sure that each different silo is very aware of what the capabilities and limitations of each other system is, so that we can be more effective at collaborating and having an understanding and closing gaps in care. And then community stigma. There's still, we still have to overcome those societal misconceptions about mental illness and about treatment in mental health courts. Again, when we're talking about working with folks, if we're helping people become healthier, more productive individuals in their community, that's a win for everyone. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, is just restore dignity and make sure folks understand the realities and try to diminish stigma. How can communities support mental health courts? Again, I think the first thing is, let me move to education first, because I think that's really the cornerstone, is that education and the understanding of a mental health court, what we can do, what we can't do, what we do and what we don't do, is so critical to being able to advocate. So one of the things I would suggest is reach out to your local mental health court. Go observe. They're open courts. And I can tell you that in my travels throughout New York State, one of the things that because I advocate for NAMI on a regular basis, because of the relationship that was developed here in Monroe County, and my familiarity with it, is reach out to your local mental health court, ask to speak with the judge, ask to speak with the coordinator, ask them when a good time is to come observe, and how can you be of assistance. Here in Monroe County, the relationship with NAMI Rochester, there's an advocate that is present in court, one of our court sessions every week, and who reaches out and provides ongoing support and advocacy for the participants and their family members. That started back in 2002 with Pat Sine and Donnelly Estes, and continues today. And the opportunities have grown to offering peer support services, programming, and various different classes and support groups for participants. Volunteerism. Again, offering support services to mental health court participants. Oftentimes what we do is we try to get our mental health court participants to engage in the community. And we've done that in a number of ways. We have volunteers that will volunteer at NAMI Rochester. We have folks that will go to the Mental Health Association. Recovery is another program. But again, trying to make sure that we are all working together so that we can support the individuals in the mental health court, and making sure that we're advocating for services to be offered and resources available for folks in need. Advocacy, that is so important. Supporting legislative efforts to secure funding and resources for the courts and for our participants. And advocating for more services, more clinicians, more housing opportunities, more peer support available to folks. The ongoing advocacy is crucial, and it's one of those things that has to be sustainable, the advocacy effort. We have to constantly be mindful of the need for services. And then collaboration. All of this, if we have one that's the cornerstone, if education is the cornerstone, then collaboration is the secret sauce. In order to be effective, if we're going to be advocating as a community for community resources, we have to bring everyone to the table and make sure that there is a seat available for everyone at the table, so that we can advocate for what people really want and what they really need, and to make sure that we are being as effective as a collective as possible. So in summary, I want to at least leave a few minutes for questions. Mental health courts represent a progressive approach to justice, focusing on treatment and service connections over punishment. And I realize when I say progressive, I also told you that they began in 1997, but I think that that's really important, is that there is a constant evolution and constant growth, and science changes. So as long as we continue to subscribe to that, we will be a progressive approach to justice. And we're constantly learning how we can be more effective and meet people's needs. There's a call to action. Community involvement, education, and advocacy is not a one-time commitment. This is something that is critical for our success of the mental health courts, for the expansion efforts. And most importantly, I mean, not most importantly, but also really important, is sustaining the existing mental health courts. Just because a mental health court is open and operational, doesn't mean that we can fail to put attention on that court. We need to be able to get communities involved in each of the 62 counties in New York State. I guess in my final thought, mental health courts provide critical support, services linkage, and a roadmap out of the criminal justice system for justice-involved individuals with mental health needs. It's an important roadmap, and mental health courts, the court part, is only one vital piece of the whole puzzle. We're in this together. We are stronger together. And when we all work together, we create amazing outcomes for the people in our communities, for people in need, for our systems. One of these days, and each and every day, we have the opportunity to change lives. And we do it best when we do it in a collaborative way. And for that, I thank you. And I thank the folks at NAMI for your commitment to education and advocacy, and your support of the mental health courts. That concludes my piece of the presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much for that presentation. There are some questions in the chat. I can read them out to you. Carrie Banks asks, is there a list of counties with navigators?
I would reach out to the OMH Diversion Center. Tricia George, I believe, does have a comprehensive list for each one of those, each of the counties.
Okay. Tara Fischler is also asking, what are the levels of reduced recidivism? Because you mentioned that before, one of your earlier slides. Have numbers
Sure.
available.
You know what, if I can do that offline, I will provide some resources and some references. That's in the chat. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Okay.
If you could put that in the chat, that would be good. Does anyone else have any questions? You can ask in the chat, or you can raise your hands. We've got a thank you.
My pleasure.
Carrie Banks is asking, how can libraries help?
I think one of the things, as I said, I think one of the most is education, and letting folks within a community understand that there is a resource, knowing where those resources are, where the mental health courts are in your community, and making sure that you could refer people to the proper location if they have questions.
All right. Another question is about emailing the recording. I think the recording will be uploaded to the NAMI website. You can find it where I mentioned it before in the beginning of the presentation. We will get our tech together to make sure that everyone is able to access it. Any other questions? Well, it looks like you really gave everyone a lot of information.
I hope so. And my contact information is included on the slides. If people have any questions after the fact, feel free to reach out. Or if they have questions regarding, where those mental health courts are in their communities, feel free to reach out, send me an email. I'd be happy to get back to them.
Would you be able to put that contact information directly in the chat? I think most people tend to access that much more easily. Thank you.
Very well.
All right, that was the lunch and learn. I'm not sure. I believe that Christine had something to present, but if not, then
No, I do not. I just wanted to say this recording will be on the website. Once I get the link, it'll be posted up there.
all right. Thank you so much.
So I was on the call in case there were any legal questions, and if anyone does have any legal questions about mental health courts, you can feel free to email me as well, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for presenting. I think we can officially end this lunch and learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, you too.